And this is one of the partnership that we have with international coffee organizations, is one of the partnerships that we are going to be featuring today. So we have worked with International Coffee Organization for the past 2 years, working on their coffee public-private sector working group, task force. They have 5 different task forces, and throughout the task force, one of the strategy is to embed gender perspectives. And the past couple of years, Blanca and I have been, mostly Blanca, have been involved in meetings to ensure that we have been embedding gender strategies in the coffee sector in the 5 working groups. So today's program is going to be the sector-wide, the roadmap. Wolfgang Weinemann is going to present to us about the sector-wide forum between public and private task force, the roadmap 2030 that has been endorsed, which is looks at a sustainable and prosperous future for coffee producers and the sector as a whole. And to achieve gender equality via gender transformative strategies is a key component of this roadmap and was signed off by all members. And actually, the ICO had engaged Oxfam to do the consultative process. And thus, there is now an opportunity to ensure that gender equity is firmly embedded in public policies, business practices, and interventions. And so this webinar will give you an overview of the task force gender transformative strategies and discuss with all of you what needs to happen to move forward from theory to practice and actual tangible outcomes. So this is one of our more engagement of stakeholders, and we will be having multiple engagements over the next few months. And the next one we were going to have at our chapter forum at the SCA, we will have another engagement with all our chapter members who are present there. And then we will also have another one in Spanish that we will be offering in May 11th. We will offer a Spanish program as well. And thanks to Wolfgang for being able to do that. And so to a little bit about our speaker, Wolfgang Weinemann is advisor to the Initiative for Sustainable Agriculture Supply Chains at GIZ. I'm not going to try to expand GIZ in German, but I think pretty soon I have to learn that because I'll be moving to Germany shortly. In this role, he supports the ICO Coffee Public-Private Task Force. Wolfgang has a long professional trajectory in international development, the coffee industry, and its sustainability initiatives. He worked extensively with the private sector, mainly the hot beverage industry of cocoa, tea, and coffee, and the international development aid community at strategic and operational management levels for more than 20 years. Focus areas include strategy development, sustainable supply chain development, sustainability standards, climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, multi-stakeholder engagement processes, and public-private partnership initiatives. And we are really fortunate to have Wolfgang talk to us today about the ICO's gender strategy. And I want to thank our sponsors, supporting partners of IWCA, 8 O'Clock Coffee, Pete's Coffee, and Starbucks, who have been a constant support for IWCA, without whose support we won't be able to offer programs like this. So with this, I'm going to turn this over to Wolfgang.
Well, thanks a lot, Sarada, and hello to everyone here from London, where I'm based, where the International Coffee Organization is based. As said, I have been supporting the International Coffee Organization in the setup and the coordination of the Coffee Public-Private Task Force for the past 18 months. And I will, share with you a little bit about that task force, because it might be that some of you are not quite familiar with this initiative. And then focus specifically on the work we have been doing with the help and support of Oxfam and their Oxfam Business Advisory Service, OBUS, over the last 8 months, I would say. So a good part of 2021 to really define strong gender transformative strategies. So in the coffee sector, because of course, lots of work has been or is happening. So it's not like, nothing has been done, but there's a good and huge opportunity now bringing the private and the public sector together to really see where can we still strengthen gender transformative strategies within the companies, within governments and governmental institutions across the sector. So in the end, we actually see changes and impact for women in first place, but for the sector as a whole. So let me just go through the presentation. So as I said, and as was a little bit explained, just a little bit of background. It all started 3-4 years ago. Whilst you might recall that the green coffee prices were actually much lower than they are today. So we were talking really about a crisis for a majority of for all of the coffee producers to make a living out of coffee, and for women, coffee producers, it's always even a tougher ask. That all led to really an engagement by the International Coffee Organization, which is an intergovernmental organization. So the members are the coffee exporting countries across Latin America, Africa, and Asia Pacific, but also the importing countries, an organization that has been existing for 60 years already. But of course, over all these decades, has taken on a different role. It was much more of a regulator back in, in the decades of the 20th century, and now in the 21st century, has to look into more being of a convener, facilitator for the coffee sector. So the ICO took that topic of the coffee crisis. How can we really change the dynamics? How can we reach a transformation for the coffee sector as a whole into a dialogue phase? 6 events were scheduled across the globe. That was all still possible before the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And that led then in 2019 to the London Declaration, which was signed by 13 of the big coffee roasters and trading companies, declaring and stating their commitment to really address the structural issues in the coffee industry, in the coffee sector, and be open to work together to find the right solutions. That then led really to the setup of the Coffee Public-Private Task Force, where both the ICO member countries and the coffee companies sit together, agree their shared vision and roadmap, and then, of course, implement and operationalize that. So we actually have tangible, outcomes and impact for the coffee producers and the sector as a whole. So how was the task force then set up as a decision-making mechanism? You have different technical work streams that Sarada already referred to, that have been shortlisted, that have been agreed between all the stakeholders participating. And they are around living and prosperous income, about market transparency, about policy and institutions, so the enabling environment, both in exporting and importing countries, on resilient coffee landscapes, and an overarching work stream on sector coordination, where we specifically put the gender transformative agenda as well. All these technical work streams prepare, proposals according, to what has been agreed, and presented to the task force for their approval. And if consensus is reached in the task force, it goes then to the maximum authority of the International Coffee Organization, which is the council, which meets twice a year. As a matter of fact, next week there's a council meeting, and then all the member countries adopt then these proposals from the task force. The members, roughly, you see an overview. To the left side, you see the private sector. So next to the companies, the signatories of the London Declaration, you also have the two big coffee sustainability initiatives, which is the Global Coffee Platform and the Sustainable Coffee Challenge, and some representatives of the ICO Private Sector Consultative Board, which are sort of the private sector associations in both producing and importing countries. And we have the India Coffee Trust and the National Coffee Association of the United States of America as representatives of the private sector. On the ICO member countries, which is the block in the middle, you can see we have a representation. There are, of course, altogether around 70 member states in the ICO. They can't be in the task force. Well, they could be, but then it would be a little bit difficult, lots of people around the table. So there's a regional representation across the exporting countries, again, across, the different regions of Latin America, East and West Africa, and Asia Pacific. And from the importing country side, we have two representatives, the EU, speaking, of course, on behalf of all their member states, and Switzerland. The whole task force is accompanied by lots of observers from the UN system, but also organizations, as mentioned, IWCA, who has a long-standing memorandum of understanding and collaboration with the ICO. So organizations from the UN, but also NGOs, fair trade, so the certification bodies are all sort of connected to the task force, but are not formal members. And we have then also supporters that make the whole thing actually viable, and with their financial and in-kind support, both from NGOs, but also from the German government via GIZ. I'm a staff member, and also from the Swiss corporation SECO. So the first big task was really, to agree on a joint vision and the outcomes as a task force the private and the public sector want to achieve in the period up to 2013. On 2030, of course, is aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, because the ICO, while it's not formally a member of the United system as an agency, but very much aligned to the UN system. So the vision that was agreed between all stakeholders is that we have a sustainable and prosperous future for coffee producers, and hence you see the focus really of this task force is on the producers and the sector as a whole. So, of course, it only can work if, all participants across the value chain, see a future, a prosperous future in coffee, and key outcomes that might not differ from, what you have seen in other initiatives in the coffee sector. So it's very much around economic resilience and social sustainability, but also specifically on market transparency, a better balanced demand and supply, responsible consumption, and diversity of origins. So, to recognize that there are many, many producer countries, and that's important for, their national economies and livelihoods of smallholders. The environmental sustainability through sustainable production and consumption, ever more important, given the really critical news from the climate crisis. And last but not least, the effective enabling conditions. So again, where governments very much and companies with their business practices will come in to make that all reality. So that's sort of the background to the task force. And we then, as a task force secretariat, look very much to, really the question how imperative it is to ensure that the gender transformative approaches are embedded in that roadmap up to 2013 in all what we do in the initiatives and the activities. Not to see it as a single activity or even a work stream, I would say, but actually embedded, so that all the work streams you see there, that the whole roadmap, initiatives and activities have a clear guidance and push really the agenda in terms of gender transformation throughout. And as was mentioned by Sarah and myself, so that we couldn't do ourselves. The ICO is a very small organization. The task force team is even smaller. It's basically myself and then these other organizations in leading different work streams, sort of the thematic work streams. But so we had the support of Oxfam throughout the last couple of months to really get this work done. And the process was funded by GIZ Germany. There was a public tender and that was won by Oxfam and by OBERS. IWCA has been involved from the outset. So, they're a key ally and partner, as I said, for ICO for years. So not just explicitly for the task force, and the whole work happened and engagement happened quite intensive, I would say, from May to December 2021. And I'm not going through the different rounds, but very much, Oxfam really had to dig deep, and the team at Oxfam, which did a fantastic job, had to dig deep to understand what's happening in the different technical work streams, reach out to different stakeholders, because as you've seen from the slide, there are lots and lots and lots of stakeholders involved. One more central, of course, the decision makers, but then of course lots of observers and supporters that also have, of course, very much to say and influence on gender, on the gender topic. Then, the work really happened along lots of workshops and meetings, and then, to get a proposal discussed by the different levels of the task force, giving feedback to Oxfam and the team to really then come up with a proposal that was shared at the end of last year in November, December, to the task force, and was as such adopted by the task force as sort of our guiding route to include it. And again, it all starts, of course, with a vision. So what have we set out to achieve around the prosperity for coffee producers and the sector as a whole? And there were then three elements that were key, to insert in the roadmap on gender transformative vision. And one is make women's valuable role visible and transform traditional roles for women and men. So again, not just stay put, but actually, push the agenda further, involve men, which I think, by now should, be definitely recognized as an absolute must. That, and especially I would say again in dynamics of a coffee industry, a coffee sector, which is still very much male dominated, and where you just have to see how power relationships and power plays really have to be broken up to see how women can have a different and more visible role. Second, create enabling environment to address structural barriers and support women's participation in policy and decision making. The task force is very much on a, in a policy environment, right? And it's a very global, on a very high level, with governments, with, the companies. So I think the participation in policy and decision making is definitely a vital aspect, because we're not going to really achieve gender transformation, which in the sector if we just carry out activities of, awareness raising, or just, specific training exercises and raising capacity, all very important. But actually, it's very much on that decision-making and policy-making level. And last but not least, to increase the support, of leadership roles in the value chain as well. So again, not just on a producer level, where all, I think, admittedly, lots of effort is already happening, but actually along the value chain. How can we recognize and how can we bring in and strengthen women's, leadership roles along the value chain? And how do we? So what should we do? What tools do we have at hand, and should we use to get us there? So, again, all starts from the roadmap with vision, with a gender lens, and so to look into the pillars for, to clearly identify them, having guiding principles, having specific metrics, so we actually know if we are progressing or not. And of course, what also was important there, so it doesn't stay generic, but that, that transformative concept and strategies have a clear guidance for each of the technical work streams, because, it's not the same that we talk gender transformative strategies for living and prosperous income, for example, versus on market transparency or resilient coffee landscape. So that we needed them also to flesh those out. So the pillars that were identified and were proposed by Oxfam and adopted by the task force were critical reflection. Again, very often lacking. Do we actually, all understand what's at stake and what's happening, and really look not into the symptoms, but the root causes? Meaningful participation from diverse perspectives. The second one, to really invest time and resource to increase the ability to engage. So we all know that very often there is willingness, but there is no capacity really to participate marginalized groups like women and youth and others into these very complex processes, and hence nothing meaningful actually in to change their situation will occur. And last but not least, also on communication and monitoring of progress made, again with the metrics, and be accountable publicly to really demonstrate that we are progressing and it's not just staying all on the paper. The role of the task force stakeholders, as I said, there's the ICO as such, the ICO Secretariat, which is sort of, the operational unit of the council. So definitely the ICO as an organization needs to lead by example with gender policy strategies and activities, and facilitate also the knowledge exchange. Again, there are, of course, in coffee, lots of other organizations and knowledge exchange, but the ICO could really provide that as an overarching now body, across the globe, across all its members, and with the participation now of the private sector, also together that experience and knowledge, which undoubtedly exists, because there are, of course, lots of bilateral initiatives and projects led and financed by the private sector for gender transformation as well in the coffee sector. Then on the public sector, which is, on the national level of the ICO member countries, especially in exporting countries, to galvanize support and resources. Galvanize resources, of course, also on the importing countryside, because they are usually, also the donors for lots of the development aid happening. And the private sector, very much about business practices. So how can, you as a company, how can I really put gender sensitive responsible practices into my procurement and in general in the engagement with producers and my suppliers, and go beyond, of course. That's a point that I think was well taken as well. Go beyond the minimum due diligence, because we hear, of course, due diligence becomes ever more wider, or wide-ranging. Especially, the EU now has a couple of initiatives in the pipeline. Individual countries have their due diligence legislation, but it's always important to go beyond and look. Okay, is that enough? Will that really take us to the vision we want to achieve, or we have to do more? On the guiding principles, again, was very much defined standards for inclusion and participation of women, youth, and marginalized groups. So, again, the whole participation, how do we ensure that? What kind of standards we as a task force in the technical work streams and overall can set? Engage in a reflective intergenerational dialogue, because of course, that's very acute and important that, we don't just stay stuck and reach out really to the combination gender and youth. How are young people really looking into that? There are huge opportunities, I would say, to really push, the whole agenda and the social norms further. Advocate for training and budget for women producer organizations. Again, it's not just enough to have, clear strategies, but actually put the resources, hence, the budget into the different initiatives and activities that will be carried out. So this training can, actually happen. On the fourth principle was about embed gender sensitization and awareness of gender issues. That's probably something that will always have to be carried out. So, that probably from your daily experience and from your own initiatives and projects, that this is not static, right? With one probably event or activity, we only go so far. So that's probably something that in all what we do, we continuously have to raise the bar, have to see, how it can be, embedded in terms of awareness and from awareness then to action. Last but not least, the principle of gender champions. So again, to raise really in the leadership role women's representation and participation through partnerships with different organizations in producer countries, in importing countries that work on that topic, again, like IWCA and others. I'm not going to go through the whole, slide of the gender metrics, because of course that, is, there are lots of details, but I just would highlight the actually 5 then metrics were highlighted as really key. And again, they are so, now structured under the 3, pillars, as from the previous slide. So one key KPI will be the completion and publication of gender analysis on data, outcomes, and impact of the technical workstream activities. So again, we really that this is captured separately. We don't end up again with just very generic KPIs of our work. A second key indicator, which I mentioned already, is sort of about really track the percentage of budget allocation. So because it's all well, we want to do, lots of stuff, implement lots of strategies. If the resources are not put behind, it's just not going to happen. A third metric is the percentage of public and private sector members that have published gender policies and action plans to achieve the global targets of SDG 5 and gender equality. So again, that's sort of the public accountability. So both from the private sector and the public sector, so the ICO countries, that they really publish that. and we know that they have it, and of course then can be held accountable. A fourth metric is on the evidence of resource allocated to engage with local, and you will be pleased to hear that, IWCA chapter members or equivalent women rights organizations if IWCA chapter not presents it. Here we made the clear link that there is work happening. There is, capacity, there is knowledge and experience out there, and we should use that, and we should, definitely bank on that. But at the same time, we all know that it's not going to happen by itself, so you have to enable that. And last but not least, the fifth key KPI is on percentage of women represented at leadership level in producer association, companies, and public sector departments of task force members. Again, so how do we capture that women actually progress into leadership roles? So that's why we need a corresponding KPI. Just quickly, because we're running out of time probably, so we need a little bit to open up the question and answers. So for the individual technical work streams, then further tailored guidance and recommendations were really provided. I'm not going to, go into each and every one of them. So critical gender questions, considerations, so what, as I say, what root causes for gender inequality for a living income? What does that mean? Well, what questions do we have to ask? And then also, the proposal gives practical suggestions. So what to do about that, and again a lot about knowledge sharing and best practices, which undoubtedly is out there, and probably you and your chapters as IWCA already have a lot of these practices and knowledge available. And it's just, again, as a sector overall, how to pull it together. And so we all, don't start always from scratch, but actually, bank on what has been achieved and what can be used. Oxfam then also looked into critical success factors. So it was not just about the proposal per se, right? Because they worked, the team worked really intensively with us, with the technical work streams, the Sherpas, which are the representatives of the companies and the countries sitting in the task force. And so they also, gave us sort of an insight what they think, that proposal really needs something, to look after and to make sure that we get there. And that's the leadership within the task force from public and private sector. So from both sides, it's not enough just that, one side is really engaged and pushes forward if the other side of the equation keeps rather lukewarm. They also identified clear public commitments. Again, the accountability, this is a task force that, has to deliver, or, really committed itself to deliver. But it's, it has to be out there in the public, and hence, again, the metrics, the reporting is absolutely vital. Next to, that the resources have to be there. So when we talk about resource mobilization for the different initiatives of the task force, again, there are dedicated resources for these transformative strategies. A fourth very, I think, pertinent, important aspect is that it should be locally led, right? Whilst, we all can decide on a global level, and which is, I think, also exciting and important, but you need both, both. You need really leadership from a global level, so countries and companies coming together, but in the end, you need also the buy-in, and not only buy-in, but to shape, of course, what does that all mean from a local level. And last but not least, focus on the root causes, because so many, unfortunately, I would say, over the decades, initiatives and projects had good intentions, but they really didn't achieve lasting impact in terms of gender transformation, because they did not look into the root causes, but rather into the symptoms. And I think that's the last slide. So we also had key learnings, discussed with the consultancy team about the learnings of the whole process. So definitely there's the high level of commitment, was sensed, is there. But low, accountability or really to implement gender transformative approaches. So it's a little bit still, okay, we got to the first big milestone of high level of commitment, but now it has to get real. And how to then translate the ambitious roadmap vision and goals into tangible actions from a gender perspective. Again, you always need to have that at the forefront. It's never enough just to, produce a proposal and discuss it once in a while, but that it's actually, inserted in the discussions, in the day-to-day discussions of the technical work streams. Opportunity to increase sharing of activities to advance gender equality by ICO on members. So, I'm pleased to that came out as a key learning. So the opportunity is there now. It's just to grasp it and see how ICO can really embrace that topic, that agenda, and really make it, its own. And hence, it's not just a task force issue, but actually, a whole ICO organizational topic to stay. Significant potential for public and private sector members to provoke system change, but must be challenged to do more. So yes, there's the opportunity for systems change because, we are talking really on a government level, and we are talking about, the big multinational coffee companies. But, hence probably, also a role for IWCA, challenge us, interrogate us, see, if this actually is happening. So we always need the stick, I would say, next to the carrot. Last but not least, value of capacity building to deepen understanding of key gender issues and strengthen engagement with women and underrepresented groups. Again, you have seen that in previous slides. So capacity building is keeps to be vital for the future. We never can say sort of a tick box mentality. It's done, and we can move on to the next step, but to really ensure that it's there. So thank you very much, and happy to look into the different questions, but also open up to much more of a dialogue with all your experience to see how this all really, as Sarah says, goes from theory to actually practice. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for this great presentation. I think this is just the start. We have a strategy, and now we really need to translate into action. And, and you have outlined all the major steps, the pillars, and what needs to happen. And this is just one of the processes where we want to engage in these stakeholder engagements to bring questions to the forefront so we can engage all of you in getting some answers. So the question, I think there was one question that I think as you progressed in your presentation, I think it was answered. It was more about goals that are more or less straightforward, such as increasing visibility. I can imagine many ways this goal could be accomplished, but for the more ambiguous or complex goals, such as creating an enabling environment or improving agency in women's roles, how did you go about working toward concrete, tangible tasks or points to achieve this goal?
Yeah, so I think the subsequent slides, there you have to, that's why to work across the different pillars, to really see that from, to have, the right metrics there as well to ensure that it's, adopted by all the different stakeholders participating in the task force, and to report back. And in some, definitely, as you say, in some of these pillars and strategies, it will be more straightforward. In others, it will, take probably much longer, and it also will be very different in the different scenarios of the countries. Remember, this is a global initiative, not country specific or regional specific. So it will have to play out. But hence, that combination of, yes, we provide the framework as a task force, but it needs to be really then, developed and hashed out on a local, national level, because as always, there you have to bring in really the particular cultural, of course, and social perspectives of stakeholders to make it work.
And then there is another question: why is the action plan in the gender metrics task force not one of the main indicators? We want concrete actions to get outcomes. I'm not sure if I understand the question.
So we have, of course, overall different indicators, metrics. So not just those, right? So each technical work stream has its indicators, the task force overall, which is still a little bit work in progress. These gender-specific KPIs have been signed off by the task force, but overall, we have a good part of the metrics signed off, but there's still some discussion on, for example, sustainable production and responsible sourcing, because there is a very different take from different players what that means, and so there's still some way to go or to discuss and get agreement that we have the full set of metrics, which then, together with the gender metrics, will be put together in an M&E system, and again tracked and then be able to report on.
Good. Any other questions from the participants? One is, why is a man giving the framework for a gender plan? So no, actually, I think, we also need to have men involved in all of our gender. I think we first need to start sensitizing men and boys about gender issues. And so I think, yeah.
Yeah, man, but it's always a valid question, right? And so if you have a KPI of more women in leadership role, and then you look across the task force itself, how many women versus men are in the task force or in even the ICO, management structure. Yeah, so it's a valid question, and I think that was also put to the task force, right? Well, you have to look in-house, and I think it was one of the slides, so ICO, to assume a leadership role in that. Well, you have to reflect on that. And I can happily report that the new executive director of the ICO will be finally, for the first time ever in the organization's life, a woman, Vanusia Nogueira from Brazil, and she will assume her role on the 1st of May. So at least some change. And I will be around for another 18 months, and then someone else will take on the coordination of the task force, and perfectly, and hopefully will be a woman, and so we get a shift there as well.
Yeah, I think even when but it was varied stakeholder group that was engaged with Oxfam. I know Giselle was the main point of who developed the strategy itself. So I think we really need to get both. Women need to be engaged throughout, but men also need to be engaged in this conversation.
Definitely.
And then there is another question, but I think it is a suggestion. I would suggest to consider a communication tool for gender behind coffee brands to push accountability. Because we did talk about, I mean, we have the gender strategy, we have gender, all of these pillars that we have identified, and accountability is what has been missing in the past. So I think this is a great suggestion to consider a communication tool.
Yes, well, I think, a communication tool always can then or should come out of, the M&E, or when you have a report. So how do you, shout about it? What, how do you take away, and how can you then, really get a discussion going and based again on the information gathered in terms of, okay, is something moving forward? Is something happening? Or does it just stay on the paper? So communication is always key, with all, of course, the complexities then of languages and, again, cultural background. So sometimes, when I explain it, it might come across very differently if someone else explains it. So we always, constantly have to be, of course, aware of that as well in communications, how we really come across, how we transfer all these things in different contexts.
And hi, Dorian from Jamaica. Hi, Dorian. So Dorian's question is, how easy will it be to access ongoing reports?
The reports, and also once we have the M&E system up and running, the reports will be available online on the new ICO website. That is just now in being set up, so it's more user friendly, because the current one you really need a lot of time to find stuff. So the new one hopefully is much more, will be definitely more user friendly to find these reports. And of course we have open sessions of the task force. So there are the closed sessions of the Sherpas where they decide on the proposals, but there are 4 times a year, and the last one was in February. The next one is end of April, actually, the 28th of April. That's open to everyone, and there the different technical work streams will report, and hence, they also will on their work, but hence also then on gender transformative shares, so what has been done or what has not been done to embed that. So I think next to sort of more, written reports, I think is these sessions where you also can then launch your questions to the different lead organizations of the technical work streams and to the Sherpas.
And I think around the same topic as Ruthan's question is about, is there a draft of the ICO gender metrics that you mentioned, if that can be viewed today? And she does understand that it is not complete yet.
Well, the gender, so this whole proposal, which is of course many more pages than I pulled together, or actually Giselle from Oxfam pulled together and sort of presenting it to the Sherpas, that I have to see. I think it is online, but because of the change now of the website from the old website to a new ICO website, I would have to check again, but it will be definitely there under resources. So there will be a resource tab where you can find, the overall proposal, which also includes these metrics.
Great. And then just a couple of comments is Ruthan. Yes, we will welcome Ms. Nagueria to lead ICO, so which is a really fresh change that we have needed for a long time in the coffee industry. And Ivan also says that we need more men talking about gender equality, influencing changes and sharing power. Yes, definitely, men need to be part of the conversation. And then another question by Claire. Thank you for outlining the pillars of the task force. Is there a timeline for reporting on some of these metrics from task force members?
As I said, we are setting up over the next couple of months, hopefully, the M&E, so the monitoring evaluation system with these metrics, and then usually it will be a yearly report on that, because again, these are metrics that they're more on outcome level, they're not on output level. They will be tracked and yearly, because it's a huge effort, data effort, gathering effort, because it's across the countries and across the companies that you have to gather that and pull it together.
Great. I think that covers all the questions. Does anybody else have more questions? And let me look at the chat as well here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's just from Giselle.
Yeah. Giselle is in the also part of the attendee. So
thanks a lot, Giselle, and again to her and her team.
Yeah, and she has shared in the chat the gender transformative approaches for the task force, so you can easily download that document. The link is in the chat.
Okay, great. Hopefully the link works because of the shift to the web the website, but I think it's still live, so that should work.
Yeah. So if there aren't any more questions, you know, I think I mean, this is just a conversation. The stakeholder engagement is just starting. I think as you have ideas or comments for IWCA or for ICO through Wolfgang, please do share. Email IWCA. We can easily share it with ICO and Wolfgang, and because all of you, we need all of you to participate to make the strategy a success, because we need to ensure that we are engaging all women and men in this dialogue.
Yeah, I just want to you know, sort of almost like a request to you as you know, especially IWC chapters in the different countries and regions. Now, the task force is now from this year on going into operationalization and implementation in exporting countries, right? Because now, if you want to change livelihoods, you know, it has to happen there. So I think there is really the opportunity now to engage more. I do understand on a global level, you know, I mean, being it on challenges of language, time zones, etc., is difficult. But in your regions, in your country, so when we work in Mexico, in Rwanda, in you know, in different countries, maybe Indonesia, they all haven't been defined. Only some have been defined. I think that's really the critical moment to, you know, again, what I said, you know, the carrot and stick. Whilst, you know, the task force can provide and should look into resources, should look into you know, implement these strategies, but you need the stick as well, meaning in a positive way. You know, you need that sort of constant challenge from groups like IWCA. What is happening? Is this and that happening? How you have inserted and embedded that? And that, you know, kind of input, I think, would be hugely appreciated to keep us on track, right? And again, it doesn't stay on paper and in a couple of years' time, and we report, yeah, all very nice, and lots of things have been implemented and actions, but real change has not happened, which of course needs many more other strategies in place. We all know everything is, you know, interconnected in a way, but that would be great. So, you know, if you could count on your insights, knowledge, really critical accompaniment of the task force in the different countries and regions, that would be great.
Yeah, you know, to that point, you know, social intervention, social issues take a long time. It is not an easy change, like economic, you know, you can probably do something with there, but not socially. It takes a long time because it is a whole shift in mentality. And I really do commend ICO taking on, this is a huge endeavor. And I really commend ICO for taking on this, looking through from living prosperous income and transformation across the whole coffee value chain, and the commitment to including gender throughout the task force, because I'm engaged in, the COSA is leading one of the work on developing cost of production metrics through the value chain for each of the countries. So, I mean, that is a huge endeavor too, to collect that. And because that will determine what living prosperous income is, because we really need to know what the cost of production is. So it is a huge undertaking. And so kudos to ICO for taking this on. and for GIZ for the support that you are providing to ensure that it is an equitable industry. So with that, I think there is one more question. How would ICO make sure if this gender transformative strategy will be followed in ICO member countries?
Again, yes, through, the metrics, as you've seen, so there is sort of, reporting on, publicly, stating the policies. And I think specifically if ICO, takes on overall that role of being a facilitator, being a knowledge hub, being sort of almost a guardian across, the task force implementation of gender transformative strategies and approach, then you have to look into what are the different countries are doing. And as I said, it will of course play out differently in different countries, in different speed probably and intensity, but that's where it comes. And then, as the council, as the maximum authority of the organization, would have to adopt resolutions, would have to report, and I think that's where you have then the accountability of the member countries.
Wonderful. So those were the last of the questions. So I think, we don't need to hold on people longer than needed. So I just want to thank all of you for participating in this discussion. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we will have another one in Spanish on May 11th. So we will send out information through our communications newsletter and all our different communication channels about the upcoming Spanish version of the same talk. And so Wolfgang, thank you so much for making the time to give us this presentation. And we will see you at the SEA. As many as you are going to be there, we will look forward to engaging with all of you in person at the SEA in Boston.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to Blanca and Jimena and Maria Hill, staff of IWCA, who have been working behind the scenes and putting all of this together.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.